In this skill builder, you will learn to build a spinning target for your marble launcher game. Part 1 instructs you to make the individual parts of the spinning target. Part 2 demonstrates the use of assemblies to make the final spinning target. Mate connectors are used to position parts and surfaces in assemblies. There are implicit mate connectors. Think of these as built-ins or default mate connectors. In this tutorial, we will demonstrate defining locations of mate connectors. We will also use the Transform tool. In 2D sketches, Transform can be used to select a sketch entity and use the arrows to slide or rotate the entity to a new position. The Transform tool can also be used with parts. It can be used to move, rotate, copy, or scale a part. Let's begin to make the parts for the spinning target. First, let's make the legs of the stand. Open a sketch, select the front plane. We will use the Line tool and draw half of the leg. Now we'll go ahead and add the dimensions. Now let's use the Mirror tool. We will mirror about this line. And our sketch is complete. Now we will extrude our sketch to a depth of 6 millimeters. There we go. That's the first leg. Now we will add a mate connector. And here is the Mate Connector tool. We will want a rod to go across from this leg to another copy of this leg. So I'm going to look at this face because that's where I'd like to put the Mate Connector. So select that tool, and we want it on the entity. So I'm going to zoom in, and I want, you'll notice default mate connectors will show up in different places. They can be on edges. See, if we spin it, you can get edges and in different directions. I want to select this mate connector that is coplanar with this face. And I'll select this one because I want a mate connector near the top, but I actually want it down about here. So I'm going to select that mate connector, and I want to move that mate connector. And notice the axes here, you can see the green, the red, and the blue. And I want to move it in the direction of that green, which is the Y. And I'm going to choose, I want it 3 millimeters from the top. And there it goes. And if it had gone 3 millimeters above, you can also choose negative values here. If I do negative 3 millimeters, it moves that way. So you may have to experiment with the sign, but we want 3 millimeters. That's perfect. So we'll go ahead and close that. Next, we will use the transform. We will make a copy of this leg. And here's the transform tool. So we'll select that. And we want to transform. This is the first time we'll be using the menu down here of the parts, because we will make multiple parts in the Part Studio. So we want a copy of Part 1, and we want to translate it by distance. And again, you can explore the different options depending on what sort of transform you need. And I want to copy the part, and I want to move it a distance of 50 millimeters. And we have to tell it the direction. And I want it to move normal to the front plane that we have our sketch on. So I'm going to select the front plane as the direction. Okay. And notice if I wanted it on this side, to help me think about adding mate connectors to that, I can choose the opposite direction arrow, and then it will be there. You can also adjust by clicking and dragging that arrow. I'll return that to exactly 50 millimeters. And go ahead and close that. And now I have 2. Let's go ahead and make another mate connector on this side. And then we can build the part that's the rod for our spinner on the target. So I'm going to zoom in there. I want a mate connector. And let's zoom in. Yes, I want the one that is coplanar with that face. So I select that. I'm going to want to move it. And again, we want it 3 millimeters. This time it happened to go up above, so let's change the sign on that to be negative. And that's where we want that, 3 millimeters below the top edge. Okay. So we've got our stand. The next part we will be constructing is the rod that goes between the 2 legs. So we'll start with a sketch, and we'll choose the right sketch plane. And it will be a cylindrical rod. We'll have a diameter of 5 millimeters. And now we can extrude the rod. And to a depth of 30 millimeters. And the rod has been completed. Next, we need to construct the spinner that goes around the rod. Start with a sketch. We'll build this one on the top plane. Zoom in. Now we will construct the spinner that goes around the rod. So we need 2 concentric circles. We'll go ahead and add our dimensions. We want the inner circle to be 9 millimeters and the outer circle to be 15. We're done dimensioning. We can go ahead and now we will add the straight parts that the marble will actually collide with. So we'll use the line tool and we'll draw one above and below. Oops. The lower one I'm going to make a little bit thicker so that it has more mass, so that after it spins that it will tend to end up with the skinny part on top, and it will always have a part to collide with. Basically, the spinning target will reset itself. So to go ahead and make these symmetric, what we're going to do is just make these 2 lines, constrain them to be equal. We'll do that for the top and bottom of the spinner. Those have to be equal as well as those. Okay. Go ahead and set the dimension for that. And that's a little too thin. Let's make it 3 millimeters. There we go. That looks good. And we'll dimension the bottom thickness, and we'll make that one 8 millimeters. Let's go ahead and dimension the height of those. Let's make each of those to be 17. I'm going to go ahead and use the trim tool. Just so that it's easy for me to see the nice enclosed shape. Close my sketch. That looks good. Let's go ahead and extrude that sketch. And we want this one to have a depth of 25 millimeters. Okay. And you see that it has our hole in it right there. It's very good. Okay, next, let's just maybe put a point value on here. You can put decorations, a place for you to import an image and have that image on here. I'm going to go ahead and just put a point value on there. So I'm going to select the face of that upper part for my sketch, and I'm going to use text And go ahead. Let's say it's 10 points. So for the 0, I think we'll want to choose a stencil font so that when we remove the material, it's not just a big hole. We use the stencil. That should look okay. All right, that's looking a little bit too big and it's sideways. So we can go ahead and transform that. So I click the transform tool, and then the entity I want is this sketch, and notice how these arrows show up. That's its manipulator. And you see this one that has the curved line there. I'm going to use that because I want to rotate that. I want to rotate it 90 degrees. Looks good. And I need to click to save that transforming change. And drag it back over to the face that I want it. That looks good. I'll save that sketch. And now I'll extrude. Sketch, I want to remove it. I'll choose through all. There we go. Now we have all of our parts completed for the spinning target.